2024 for posterity. And this morning, Indian time, I think around 9:20 Indian time, Gopal Krishna Maharaj, one of the best devotees in Prabhupada's mission, left this world. So in his honor, I'm going to sing this song and then speak a few words about Gopal Krishna Goswami. Jayanilo Prema Dana Karuna Prachur Eno Prabhu Kota Gila Acharya Thakur. I think I'll read the translation for each verse so you can follow it. Which means he who brought the treasure of divine love and who is filled with compassion and mercy. Where has such a personality as Srinivas Acharya gone? Kaha Morda Sadhu Rupa, Kaha Sanatan, Kaha Dasaragu, Nata Patita Pavan. Where are my Sarup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan and where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen? Kaha Mora Bhatta Yuga, Kaha Kaviraja, Ekale Kota Gela, Goranata Raja. Where are my Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta, and where is Krishna Das Kaviraja? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? Pashane Kutibo Mata, Anale Pasibo, Gauranga Gunera, Nidhi Kota Gele Pabo. I will smash my head against a rock and enter into fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Se Sava Sangita Sange, Je Koilo Vilas, Se Sanga Napaya Kande, Narottama Das. Being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all of these devotees in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottama Dasa simply weeps. So, just like artists often, they sign their paintings at the bottom. So it's a Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition that the acharyas, they sign their songs at the end. They often put their names in the last verse. So, Gopal Krishna Goswami, I first met him in 1970, which now seems like a long time ago for those who are not experienced, those who weren't there. But for those who were there, it just seems like, yeah, 1970. And so I met him at his wedding. I was a brahmachari in Boston. Prabhupada sent me to Boston to work on his books, and he got married there. He came down from Montreal to Ekaini. And then I didn't have so much contact with him, but in 1974, Prabhupada asked me to be on the GVC in charge of Latin America. And then in 1975, the next year, Prabhupada asked Gopal Krishna to be on the GVC. So after that, we would meet every year, of course, in Mayapur. Sometimes we'd meet other places, but mostly every year in Mayapur. And also in 1979, I don't know, I think maybe Giriraj invited me, maybe Gopal Krishna invited me. But after the Mayapur festival, instead of just going back to my zone in Latin America, I went to Bombay, to Juhu, and spent over a month there with Giriraj and Gopal Krishna. And it was very nice. It was actually probably the longest time I ever spent in India, not for a GVC meeting. And of course, Juhu back then was very quiet. It was just sort of out of the city. Now it's very different. But back then it was not like being in the country, but it was, you were definitely outside the city. It wasn't an urban environment at all. And so Gopal Krishna Maharaj, he was a perfect host. He was, we always, to use the slang, always hit it off very well. We were always, I could just see him when he would see me, he'd get this big smile. And I just remember that, him being just very, very happy to see me. And a very kind brother and friend. So, sort of a funny thing is that because I was in Bombay and because I was a prominent leader, they set up all these special programs for me, these Pandal programs. And so every night I would drive with Gopal in one of the temple cars, which surprisingly was an ambassador. At that time, there were only ambassadors in India. In fact, one time Prabhupada was riding one, he said, "Ambassador, always a bad ride." Anyway, so we were, in those days, to go from Juhu to Bombay, it probably takes more time now, but it took almost an hour to get all the way because the programs were right in the center of Bombay. And so one amusing story is that on the way there and the way back, some business person who offered some service put up these big billboards that said "Call Gopal," and then it had a phone number. And so every night when we would go on the way to Bombay, I would tell him, "Gopal, you should be humble. Why are you advertising yourself like that?" I would tease him about these big billboards called Gopal every night. And so for a week or two, we would go. I remember those drives. They were so ecstatic. Just, it was just him and myself in the back seat of the car with a driver. And every night I remember we would talk. It was just very enjoyable association. So those are just anecdotes. But as far as his achievements in Prabhupada's service, it's fair to say that no one in ISKCON did more for Prabhupada. Uh, he and he was also humble. I was gonna say like a joke. I was gonna say like me, but but he was actually humble, and he he was very calm and peaceful, and yet he was doing so much. He had this gift where he could be engaged in an extraordinary amount of devotional service. He opened many, many temples. He was very dedicated to book distribution. In fact, uh, he was in charge. He was the PPT trustee for India. And so he was printing all the books, and gradually it was divided into different languages like Bengali and Hindi and so on. But he was very devoted, just like back in those days. I was also a trustee, and back then, I don't know if people even understand what it was like back then. But back then, because Prabhupada was really pushing book distribution, and it was actually book distribution in a sense which built Mayapur and Vrindavan to a large extent, and really got it was the BBT back then was like the bank of ISKCON, and books were being distributed, and Prabhupada had the power to develop India, which has really served as an anchor for ISKCON, a spiritual anchor, because there is I mean, for all the whatever. I mean, Mayapur and Vrindavan on the spiritual level are really the most important places. One time, I've told the story before, one time I was with Prabhupada in Mayapur. I'd spent the previous month with him uh, in Mayapur. I came there to spend a month with him, and it was very nice. In those days, that was the month before the Gaur Purnima festival, and there were very few devotees in Mayapur. I mean, Western devotees, probably maybe like a dozen. That was in 1976, like a dozen, and so we really got to spend this wonderful quality time with Prabhupada. I just, it slipped my mind why I brought that up. I was gonna Anyone remember what I was thinking?
The spiritual way.
Spiritual, yeah.
The what?
Spiritual.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Um, so it was a wonderful experience because it was Mayapur. Kind of, we sort of had Mayapur to ourselves. There was hardly anyone there before the festival. And you could just walk, take country walks everywhere, and there were very few buildings. In fact, I think there's only one building, which was the Lotus building. And Brahmatirtha, of course, has very special pastimes in Mayapur. So, so Gopal Krishna, he really played a major role in developing the movement because when book distribution started, Prabhupada started the Life Member Program in India because people wouldn't join for various socio-historical reasons. Living in an ashram was considered not respectable in India because, and this could never happen in ISKCON, you tended to find lazy people in ashrams that, didn't want to get a job in the real world. And also just simple people that just wanted to serve. They actually wanted to devote themselves. They were so you get kind of simple people in ashrams. And so in India, because a lot of people would live in ashrams just because, they get free food and free place to stay. And so it was not a respectable thing to live in an ashram. So no respectable family would allow their son, or and not to speak of their daughter, to move into a Hare Krishna temple. And yet that was the model for ISKCON. That was the model for ISKCON everywhere outside of India, that you go to a country, following Prabhupada's example, you go out and do Harinam in the street, you give out books, you preach, so you get people to join, almost always young people who don't have families and jobs. You get people to join, and then they give out more books, and that brings in more people. And so that was the model. And so when Prabhupada went to India, at first they did the same model, but no one was, they probably got tens of thousands of people to come to his programs, but there were no takers. Basically, India was very conservative then. Young people did what their parents said, even if they were, college students or whatever. And so no one's joining. So then then the question came up, how do we keep the movement going? How do we pay the bills? So Prabhupada devised the Life Member Program, where people did move into temples. They were respectable, successful people. They would pay a certain amount of money and get certain benefits. They'd get all of Prabhupada's books. They would get to stay free so many nights in ISKCON temples around the world. In those days in India, to travel outside India was like a big thing. That was very prestigious. It was almost like an elite activity. And that's who Prabhupada was engaging as life members, these sort of the elite, higher social echelons. And so, anyway, that was all going on. So then Gopal Krishna became the BBT trustee for India, and he started printing lots of books, and then gradually Sankirtan parties were organized. And India also was changing, and then sort of the ISKCON India as we know it now, with big temples and Sankirtan parties, and almost always winning the book distribution competitions because there's so many people there and so many devotees. So Gopal Krishna was instrumental, pioneer in that. And of course, he opened so many temples in Delhi. What the latest I heard is like 20 temples in Delhi. Like 20 temples and growing. It's like how many Methodist churches are there in Atlanta? Or how many Baptist churches are there in, what's a real Baptist city?
Montgomery, Alabama.
So, so Gopal, he opened many centers. He printed books. He got the books distributed. He was always calm. He was always he was expert of course, at getting to know the leaders of India, and he was just always kind. He was always just Krishna conscious, just always completely focused on Prabhupada's mission. And so it's funny because now that so many of my colleagues, are leaving the world, when I sing that song now that we just sang, Jayani Lo Prema Dana, it really, I'm starting to understand it much more. I mean, we always understood it at sort of philosophical level, but the idea that you have your what do they say? Your it's like your colleagues, your what's that word? It's a simple word in English.
Tribe.
No, not tribe. It's like your group.
Posse.
No, no, no. It's not. It's not slang. It's a serious word. You know the word?
Associates.
Associates. Yeah, associate
Cohort.
cohort. Yeah, but associates is also that. But like your group. It's like when you're in school. When you're in school and you start like in kindergarten or first grade, and then there's all the kids your age, and then you all go to the first grade, and you all go to the second grade, and so you isn't it? It's like your group, and that's who your friends are, and if your parents don't move to another location, you have the same friends for years and years. That was my experience. I had many friends who were my friends from elementary school all the way up to well, even all the way up to college, because so many of my friends went to Berkeley. And so it's like that in Krishna consciousness. You join the Hare Krishna movement, and then, of course, we can have friends of different ages, but there's sort of a natural affinity. At least there was back when we used to make a lot of devotees. There's a natural affinity for sort of the devotees you grew up with. The devotees that roughly had the same experiences, because the movement was always changing, the movement was developing. So people that joined the movement when you did kind of, joined the same ISKCON. And so, for example, I have that relationship with Kalakanta. He's younger than me, but I met him in 1972 in Portland, and we hit it off. I thought he was a really nice young man, and he's a couple of years younger than me, and so we've been friends ever since. And so when you're friends with people that you've always been friends with, you share so many memories. You understand each other. You can just refer to things, and the person knows exactly what you're talking about. And the same jokes and so on. So there's something about having your generation or your cohort, your associates. And I know myself, there are fewer and fewer and fewer of those people. First of all, because most of the people who were my generation didn't remain active in Prabhupada's mission. And, it's always nice. It's like a high school reunion. It's really great to see all your old friends for a couple hours. And, then the reunion's over and you're sort of not unhappy to get back to your real life. So, so when I meet people who I sort of grew up with in Krishna consciousness, but for many, many years have not been active in Prabhupada service, in a sense, it's almost like if you're in the fourth grade and then one of your friends flunks, and stays in the fourth grade for the next 5 or 10 years. And meanwhile, you go on to, to higher grades and you go to college. He's just poor guy still back in the fourth grade. So, I mean, I don't mean to denigrate people who, gave up active service to Prabhupada's mission, but it's just a practical psychological fact that as fewer and fewer of my generation sort of remained active, and I tried to remain active, you sort of you don't have present things in common. Like all the things you have in common were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And so, it's nice, but it's like a transcendental high school reunion. And so there are fewer and fewer people that are really your generation and have continued, like first grade, second grade, third grade, and then you continue serving Prabhupada. So they're still having similar experiences. And so that's something, when you lose that, it's pretty much everything. You understand that.
Oh yeah, intimately.
Yeah, so when you lose that, it's you feel it. And so getting now to Gopal Krishna Goswami, um, because he was one of the last ones. For me, I mean, there are very few people of my generation who are still active. and who are still prominent leaders. Bless you. I know it wasn't intentional. So, um, yeah. So as I was singing that song, I think I felt it more today than I've ever felt it, and I'm really starting to understand what it's like to have intimate friends, intimate associates. They say that between men, the strongest bonds of friendship are formed in combat. You know, especially men who are together where your life depends on your friends and their lives depend on you. And you go through all these things together and you form this lifelong bond. And so when you're out in the front lines for Prabhupada fighting to spread this movement, it forms a very powerful friendship. I remember Tamal Krishna, a few months before he left, I've told this often, he uh, he decided that we would speak once a week. He was in Cambridge and I was in America. And so TKG, if you know the Rat Pack, like with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and all those people, he was like Frank. So he was like the head of the Rat Pack of these old preachers. And so so of course he wanted to do that. So of course I did it. And I remember a couple of times he said to me something I'll never forget. He said to me that you're the last person in the world that I can talk to about certain things, and you'll understand it exactly what I mean. Because what it was really like to become a guru after Prabhupada, to go through all that. So he said that a few times, but you're the last person in the world that really understands certain things that we went through. And so when all those people, Krishna takes them to other places for service. So singing this song today, I really felt it more than I've ever felt it before. And so Gopal Krishna Goswami is he was really a model devotee. He really was. On the one hand, he was doing an extraordinary amount of service and quality of service. At the same time, he was, I know with me, he was always kind of like, old friends and almost deferential to me. And so, yeah, he was, he had a natural humility. He was fully absorbed in service. He never thought of anything except devotional service. And so he was an exemplary devotee. I mean, not simply something that you say on occasions like this because that's what you have to say, but really, um, eh, Hare Krishna, in a very, speaking very truthfully, not just saying the nice things you have to say, but he really was exemplary. He really was exemplary in his service, in his character, and so in the case of someone like that, it would be, absurd to wonder, like, I wonder what happened, where he went, or so, as far as the details of Krishna, is Krishna taking and bringing him back to serve ISKCON again? Is he going to some other world to do service? Is he going, to Krishna's world? It actually doesn't matter. We're not like the Christian salvationists. Like, are you saved? It's like as if I care. Because one time Prabhupada quoted to me this verse, which I'll quote now because I think it really applies to Gopal Krishna Goswami. That when I first asked Prabhupada if I could preach in Latin America, he said we can preach in heaven or hell for Krishna. But anyway, Prabhupada quoted this verse from the Bhagavatam that Narayana Parak Sarve, all of the Narayana Paras. The word para means supreme, and so when you put it at the end of a compound, it means one who takes that thing as supreme. Like Narayana Para Deva. The Devas take Narayan as para, as supreme. And so in this verse it says Narayana Parak Sarve. All of those who are Narayana Para, all of those who take Narayan as supreme, Narayana Paraksare Nakutas Chanabhibyati. They are not afraid of anything. Literally, they're not afraid of anything. Swarga, either if they're in heaven, material heaven, Apavarga, or if they're liberated, or Narakeshu, if they're in hell. Api Tuliartha, Darshana, they actually see it all as having the same value. Tulia in Sanskrit means equal, or the same. It's a word found in the Gita several times. So Tuliartha means of the same value. Api, they actually see it as having this darshana, they see it as having the same value. So Krishna in his infinite wisdom is taking Gopal Krishna, in fact he's probably already there, to his next advanced devotional service. And Krishna, with his perfect wisdom, knows exactly where Gopal Krishna Goswami can be happiest and do most valuable service. And so he's already, just like, during his presence here on this planet, he never missed a beat. He was always serving Prabhupada and Krishna. And so that's still happening. It's not that he was always serving Krishna, he's still being personally escorted by Krishna to his next extraordinary devotional service. So, Hare Krishna, thank you all for listening, and we'll stop here, see if Prabhupada keep
I can say something about him too.
Oh, yeah, please.
When I was kind of back from India and a little odd player because there I was in graduate school, which is kind of something you didn't do.
Oh, yeah, that was very
Unusual.
deviant.
And had a wife who wasn't still trying to figure out what these ex-hippies were doing. And Gopal Krishna Goswami particularly was nice to me. He tried to stay overnight at the temple sometimes, so I couldn't sleep there. It's just so unusual and noisy. So he'd take me to his apartment, and his wife would pack lunch, and I would take the train into New York and meet him at his desk for lunch. Just very kind. And then he did something extraordinarily brave, which was made him GBC. The temple president's wife had become a nutcase. I mean, literally, no exaggeration.
Abusive.
A highly abusive of devotees, and did things and offered things that were unofferable, just unspeakable things. And devotees were fleeing the temple and often coming to stay in my apartment to find another temple to go to. It was a very odd time. Of course, Krishna gave me a special vaccine at that time. That I watched the weirdest thing that could happen while Prabhupada was on the planet. So then nothing else could destroy my faith after that, whatever weirdness happened, and much weirdness has happened. And then one day, 3 devotees stood at the door of the temple, very brave thing to do, and said to the GBC, BBT trustee,
Temple
president, he had the highest positions, ISKCON, 3 devotees, including Gopal Krishna, then blocked the door and said, "You cannot come in." And Prabhupada was so pleased at the bravery of that, say that this is not acceptable, that he actually made him GBC. Other people objected. No, he's just some grahasta who worked at Clairol hair coloring company. That's where I meet him at his office. I mean, he worked at some marketing position at Clairol, and how could you make him GBC? But he actually earned it, and he earned the trust of Prabhupada that way. Then in December, Akandadi and I were in New Delhi, and we went to see Gopal Krishna Maharaj.
Just this December.
Just last December. And he was in very weak physical shape. His Parkinson's had gotten the best of him. He had already had serious heart conditions. And he could only speak like with a translator, meaning his voice was so soft, somebody had to put his ear by him and then tell us what he was saying. But he spent an hour with us, a very pleasurable hour discussing.
He really enjoyed association with his godbrothers.
He did. And he just, received us in his room, and we said we'd like to offer him respects. He spent an hour talking to us, because he had started like a branch of the BI in Bombay that works in Delhi, works very close with us. So we talked about this and that and what our ambitions were that way. And it was such a pleasant time. Then the next day, Akandini and he was quite ill then. I mean, his health was very strongly deteriorated.
Should we be putting the camera on you?
Oh, uh, and the next day, Kandi and I gave a joint Bhagavatam class. And there is sitting in the back of the room, it's Gopal Krishna Maharaj. As ill as he was, he wanted to come to the class. And even when he was extremely ill, he would still regularly go and offer Mangalarti. So he was extraordinarily humble and kind devotee. And he was particularly kind to me over the years, and I appreciated that. Those, I would say, special soul.
Thank you. Anyone else have any memory or association? So, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Gopal Krishna Goswami ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai.